Welcome everyone to today's Facebook Live session. We have some special guests here from Duke University who are actually going to be leading today's conversation, which is a reflection on our journey with the Navajo and Hopi Families COVID-19 Relief Fund. So I'm going to turn things over to our guests who can give you a little bit of background on today's event.
Yeah, hi. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to talk with us and join this call. We're really excited to be able to speak with you kind of in person, virtually. So my name's Addie, and we have Andrew, Diane, and Sundani, and we are all students at Duke University. We're in the community-based environmental management course right now. And so as a part of our coursework, we've been examining organizations, real life organizations that are doing amazing work in sort of the community and environmental management space. And so we came across your organization, and we would just love to, we feel so lucky to be able to have this conversation with you. So we have some questions prepared, which we can start off with, and then whatever you all feel like answering or however you want to take the conversation, that's totally open. So the first question that we have is, what do you wish people knew about the Navajo and Hopi nations, and what ways do you see the communities continue to gain autonomy over your land? And what kind of new relationships are forming across the community through the COVID relief program that are pushing this autonomy?
Great, thanks, Addie. I mean, I feel like, oh gosh, it's a tough question to answer because so many people don't know anything about Navajo Nation. So I just wish people knew about us and understood our context. There was a lot of awareness raised when the COVID numbers spiked at Navajo last spring. And we kind of surged ahead of other jurisdictions in the country for the highest contraction rate of COVID. But there wasn't a lot of discussion about why that happened. And that's something that we try to educate about. And that's, the why is why we stepped forward, because we understood that our community would be disproportionately vulnerable to COVID-19. And that can be traced back to many different factors. One of the most important factors is that Navajo Nation has been a national sacrifice area for over a century. Our Navajo Nation government was formed in 1923 to facilitate the quick and easy dispossession of our land and resources to outside interests of corporate and governmental interests of the United States. And our government has served that function very well. We have a long-standing legacy of oil and gas development, coal development, as well as uranium development. Right now we have over 523 abandoned uranium mine sites, which actually, when you talk about a site, it can include more than one actual mine. So there are actually over 1,000 mines on our lands right now, and most of them are unremediated. So the incidence of cancer in our community is disproportionately high. We've had studies done through the Navajo cohort group that have identified or traced back irradiation exposure to causing diabetes, and then we have a high incidence of diabetes in our community. So the prevalence of underlying conditions is disproportionately high on Navajo Nation because of the extensive environmental contamination in our communities. And this isn't something that's unique to Navajo Nation necessarily. I took an environmental justice course in grad school, and we did an overlay of the Superfund sites in the United States with the Indian reservations, and there's tremendous overlap. So this is really an environmental justice issue that impacts many indigenous nations in this country. So, knowing that there was this disproportionate incidence and then it was traced to contamination, and that's one thing I want people to understand, is it's not that our people aren't, washing their hands frequently enough or wearing masks or keeping up with their vaccine rotations. I mean, the vaccines only boost your immunity. So if you have a history of cancer, your benefit from the vaccine is not going to be equivalent to someone who's just a healthy person who doesn't live next to a site with radiation exposure. So just understanding that legacy of environmental contamination in our community and how that's impacted our health outcomes, I think is really important. And also the reason why I want people to know that is because these sites should be cleaned up. Our land should be restored to the pristine levels that we were at previously. And it's not acceptable to ignore this legacy of contamination in our communities, because again, it has longstanding impacts to the health and well-being of our community. So that's one major thing. And I have other things I want to share, but I'd love to hear what Shadeen has to say, and I can add on a couple more things when after she's done.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ethel. That was a really great answer. And I think that, that underlying why is so important. I know when I was studying at Duke, a lot of students I interacted with and professors and just generally staff and faculty as well, did not know a lot about the Navajo Nation or Hopi Nations. And I think that even just learning, the current realities and then digging a little bit deeper, I think that's what I encourage people to do, right? So when we're talking about the impacts of COVID and how that really affected our communities here, looking at why that is, right? You can look at the statistics to kind of see how that picture unfolds. You have here on Navajo, we have over 30% of households that do not have running water or electricity. And Ethel spoke to a little bit about why that is. And so I think you look at things like food insecurity as well, right? Over 70% of our households experience food insecurity and depend on border towns, which at least from Monument Valley, nearest border town is, 2 to 3 hours away. So having to travel long distances to access healthy foods is a big reason why we also saw a high number cases of COVID as well. And then, even looking at the current status of our economy, right? So unemployment rates are regularly at 50%. And so you kind of look at all these statistics of the current reality of families who live on the Navajo Nation and kind of understand more deeply where that's coming from, right? Everything that Ethel just mentioned. And so in terms of what I wish people knew, I wish people understood fully the day-to-day life here on the Navajo Nation. Our families have to haul wood in the winters to keep their households warm, have to haul water because our homes do not have potable water. And so just kind of understanding that hardship and the root of the cause there, I think people will fully not just understand why COVID had such a detrimental impact on our families, but just how vulnerable our communities are, to pandemics, to climate change, and having experienced longstanding environmental racism as well. I think once folks understand that, we can, make progress forward to kind of righting those wrongs, or at least making progress so that we can continue to protect our families. But I think just kind of meeting people who are really oblivious to the presence and existence of Native people in this country. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done there, but also just making sure that they understand the current realities our people are facing and why organizations like ours had to really step up to protect each other during COVID. So that's kind of my thoughts on that, but I'll pass it back to Ethel.
Yeah, and Shadeen really touched on the other points that I wanted to make, which was, we're in this exciting moment in time with this particular federal administration where the discussion is all about building back better. But what people don't understand is that in Indian country, there never was an initial build. There was dispossession of our lands and there was never any compensation for that. And then there has been no investment in our communities. There was always an expectation that Indian nations would cease to exist and Indigenous people would, integrate with off-reservation communities. And so the federal government has done little to no investment in our communities. And so the ratio of dirt to paved roads in Indian country is disproportionate. And there's this huge equity gap. And the same thing goes for broadband. Only 4% of our nation has wired access to broadband. 60% of our nation is a cell dead zone. 40% of our nation is a two-way radio dead zone. And that's what EMS uses to communicate. So, I mean, we haven't even really had the discussion on how many people we've lost because EMS wasn't able to communicate seamlessly with our ambulances as they were responding to homes in the COVID context. So, helping people understand that so they can understand that there is a need right now for something that goes way beyond Build Back Better in Indian country. We need that initial build. We need governmental infrastructure parity with the rest of the country, in addition to cleanup of the disproportionate contamination in our communities.
Thank you. That was great. Going off of that, I mean, you spoke about governance and how the current governance systems sort of increase vulnerability to something like COVID. And so what does it mean for you all to be COVID proof going forward? I know that that's been a goal, a stated mission moving forward.
Yeah, we talk about being pandemic proof and climate change resilient because, COVID posed an existential challenge to our community. And that's why we stepped forward with such urgency immediately upon recognizing that the gravity of that threat. And so, making our community strong for the long term and able to withstand these future challenges is super important because with the thawing of the polar ice cap, and we don't know in terms of bacteria and viruses, like this could be the first of many viruses to hit the globe. And so we need to be ready for that. And then, with climate change, things getting much more intensified over the next couple decades, we need to make sure that the Navajo Nation remains habitable. And so part of that is empowering people directly rather than relying on governments, because history has shown that we can't rely on our governments to meet our needs. And so, how do you do that? One thing is we're promoting food security at the local level. We had one really incredible guest who came on. We have these weekly talks, and he was sharing with us that during the Great Depression, prior to the establishment of the Navajo Nation Council in the early 1920s, when the rest of the country was going without food, we were fine because we had local food systems. There was a strong farming and ranching economy on Navajo Nation and a very strong clan system where people were taking care of their relatives in a very proactive way. And so we were thinking, like, how do we get back to that? And how do we make sure that people have the food security at the family level? Because at the end of the day, like that's really where people can go to meet their needs. So we want to re-strengthen those clan relationships, those familial relationships, the trading that was happening in terms of food, the local farming. We have hundreds of heirloom food strains that are designed for our climate. And so we want to promote a resurgence of that through promoting food security, like with the hoop houses in our community center, and help migrate people from community gardening to home gardening and to utilizing these local strains that are scientifically tailored to our conditions, and also promote better food and health practices, right? Which also makes people healthier and more likely to be immune to different viruses, or at least less vulnerable. So that's a huge part of it. But then also economically, families need to have access to electricity and running water. So if they are generating revenues like running their own small business, are able to elevate that business practice to a higher level and generate more revenues, then they can drill their own well, or they can put in their own solar system and make sure that their basic day-to-day needs are being met. Because like with COVID-19, we were giving people 2 weeks worth of food, and we were providing, fresh meat, fresh fruits and vegetables. But having grown up in a household where still my mom doesn't have electricity or running water, it was like, okay, we're giving them food, but if they don't have electricity, they're not going to be able to store that food for 2 weeks. And so, like, unless we're providing them with ice every day, there's still going to be a need for them to go into potential contact and exposure when they go purchase ice, to keep the food fresh in their ice chests, right? So there's that aspect. And then also promoting social entrepreneurship, which there are already huge amounts of Navajo people who are doing incredible things in our communities, and they're doing it as volunteers and in an unstructured manner. So how do we help them professionalize that? Through forming an NGO and accessing grant funding so that they can elevate that practice further. And a lot of that work is focused around, getting electrification into communities, getting promoting water access, safe and healthy water access. So those are some of the ways. I don't know if Shani wants to add to that. I might have covered most of the areas. Sorry, Shandine.
Didn't realize that was me. No, I think you covered everything, Ethel.
And I kind of have a follow-up question to that, where you're talking about to be pandemic proof, you have to build up like self-resiliency. So like, could you talk a little bit about how like becoming self-reliant can also help you become a better community member, or if you think that's even true?
Yeah. Go ahead, Shani.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of that actually play out, right? You are figuring out, like, I guess like last year, I kind of am thinking of a moment where, you see this pandemic playing out and reaching the Navajo Nation, and you saw individual community members, not just think about, okay, what am I going to do, but more about how am I going to protect myself and my immediate family to make sure, we are safe and we have what we need. And once that's taken care of, how am I going to help my community and then the Navajo Nation at large? And so I think that approach, you kind of saw the light go on, right? With community members, like, okay, it's not just, what am I going to do? But once I kind of figure out my status and make sure I have my resources, it's bigger than that. How do we make sure our people survive? And I think once we started seeing like really high death rates, it really became so real for our people, that it's really just ensuring our survivability. And so I think I've seen a lot of that mindset actually change, especially with, people my age that were in the community, and you could see, like, for me, for example, like I could literally see my impact on a day-to-day with the families I was providing assistance to, connecting them with resources, and also just being a part of our larger organization, and just, how we interact and how we're able to move so quickly. And so I think that moving towards sustainability is really about making sure that in your own life, right, you have what you need and you're sustaining that, but also to even be able to kind of think about other people in the community as well. I think before COVID, I think the mindset for families on the Navajo Nation and young people like myself was really just the day-to-day survival, right? Like we're thinking about, okay, I got to haul wood, so I'm warm tonight. I got to haul water, so I have, water to drink. I need to go get food. Like it's just about like the literal survival of the day-to-day. But I think we're seeing people think even beyond that now. Like, okay, I have what I need for today, for this week, for this month. But how am I going to contribute to my community for, years to come, so that that, generations down, we're not in the same position. We're not as vulnerable, and just kind of trying to find resources where we can. So I think personally, I've really seen that mindset change, and have seen a lot of people see themselves as leaders today instead of, thinking about, okay, one day I'll do this. It's like, no, like right now I have what I need to do it. And also my community needs me. And so I think that is something I've seen really come about. And I saw this meme the other day, and it was kind of just like this meme saying, the reservation has never lacked talent, but it's always lacked resources. And I think that, is something we're all a testimony to. Like we, have these resources and have been able to be incredibly impactful. And so it just kind of speaks to the talent, and the resilience that already exists within our people.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with what Shandine is saying. Something that I always try to touch on when I talk to young people, especially young Navajo people, is that they have the ability to change the world. They have an ability to make a difference. And they might feel like they're this small, insignificant person, but they can really make a difference. Even if it's in small ways, it can have big impact, especially when it's as a collective, right? So I feel like reminding people that they have agency is really powerful, especially in a community like ours, where so many people are reliant on the government. There has been a transition, as I mentioned, from strong self-sufficiency under this colonial government to a strong dependency. And so helping reawaken within people that knowledge that they can transform their community has been really, really powerful. And reminding people that, I mean, here is like providing volunteers with food so they could save community members' lives and PPE. And I think that was really powerful for people to see, like, I have the ability to lead, and we don't have to look to our tribal government or our federal government to solve our problems. We can set a vision in our own mind and pursue that immediately. Like Shani was saying, like we can pursue it immediately. Like we might not be able to do it at the level that we would like to do it, but we can at least get started, and maybe resources will come so that we can pursue this even more substantially. And really that goes back to a traditional Navajo principle of Taho Ajit Ego, right? Like it's within you, the power to do things and transform things is within you. So reminding our people of that traditional principle and their ability to make an impact has been incredible and transformative. And I'm hoping, I mean, that's like with the community centers, we take that spirit of innovation and we invest in it. We, like Shani was saying, like we've been resource deprived, even though we've had this great talent for so long, an inherent ability to do incredible things, but no one's ever provided folks with the tools so that they could take their natural talent and run with it and transform our communities. And so, because we believe that the best solutions for our communities lie within, within the people that are living in those communities, and are invested in those communities. And so our community center is all about investing in those people and providing them with those tools so that, it's like lighting a bunch of little fires. We've already lit a bunch of fires in some sense by like collaborating with all this incredible grassroots leadership in our COVID relief. And now this is like stoking those flames by giving them access to computers, fax machines, Wi-Fi, so that they can take their dreams to that next level, whether it's through professionalizing their small business entrepreneurial activities, or transforming their communities through forming an NGO.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you for that answer. Just to build off of that a little bit, about like how your organization sees the role of partnerships, both partnerships within people in the Navajo and Hopi nations? And then how do you manage external partnerships between your nonprofit and other groups who want to provide resources? So yeah, what's that dynamic like, and how do you manage those partnerships?
I mean, it's really fluid. We don't have a special formula. Really, we just focus on getting things done as quickly as possible with, like, as efficiently as possible. Our organization operates very strongly off of trust. I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Speed of Trust, but that is the complete opposite of our tribal government, where there is very little trust, there's hyper regulation, and the very slow movement of resources and allocation of resources. But for us, it's like there are lives on the line. And also, we've been in this situation for way too long. Like, this needs to change as quickly as possible, because COVID remains a looming threat. And then also climate change is right around the corner. And so we just try to operate as quickly as possible. And trust has been critical to that. So, we kind of, it's sort of, what does our partner want? Some of them want an MOA, and some of them are just fine. They're like, they're not a formal organization, they're a volunteer group. And so we just operate 100% off of trust. And so, I mean, we had some level of requirements for the COVID relief, like, health and safety protocols was super important to us, because one of our guiding principles was do no harm, right? Our goal is to help our community, not contribute to the spread of this challenge. So we were very strict in that and required everyone to go through our training program and abide by that. But mostly, internally, it's been a lot of trust, which has been strange for some of our partners because they're not used to that, especially our governmental partners. And there has been a lot of partnership, not so much with the central government, but with the chapter governments, especially some of our chapter governments that have local control through the Local Governance Act. Those guys have been vital to our operations, especially the Chinle chapter. I mean, they were able to get out multiple food distributions every week. Even now, they're housing, some of our items and moving PPE into different communities. So that's sort of a little bit of our internal partners. And then for our external partners, there also has been a lot of trust there, like with our funders. And a lot of that has been based on personal relationships, like Shondine's relationships, my relationships, our deputy director, and I mean, we just have such an awesome team. So they know all these really great people, and they have these pre-established relationships, and people knew that if they invested in us, that they would get a high return on their investment in terms of maximum impact in the community. So, I would say that was a big part of it. Shondi, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it, but I would just say that, again, just going off that trust, I think a lot of times in Indian country, we see so many people and entities working in silos. So I think as an organization, our approach was always to, cover the most ground, work as quickly as possible to help the most of the people in our communities. And so I think having that mindset, because at the end of the day, we're all working towards the same goal, right? Like, we want to protect our people, we want them safe, we want them healthy. And so I think that open mindset, at least for me, within this organization, was something so different, right? Because you're kind of stuck with it. Sometimes working in organizations where it's very different in terms of their status quo, but I think that's why we've been able to see a lot of success, is just because we work towards that goal, and so whatever we need to do to get there, we are doing. And yeah, I think here, especially in Monument Valley, just making sure that all of our entities here, like our school system, our health system, our local chapter government, we're always on the same page. And so at the end of the day, it just came down to communication. And so as my role here in my community during COVID relief was just trying to make sure that line of communication was always open and that we were helping each other. And that was something that was pretty new to people here, and kind of shocked me, right? Like as this young recent college graduate coming home and trying to work in this COVID relief space and access resources and provide for families, I also needed to build those partnerships and those networks with existing entities in my community. And learned that they never really worked together in the past. And I kind of became that vocal point in the middle for all of them. And so, and then seeing how quickly we're able to move resources, having built that foundational relationship was really great. And I think helped them also see the importance of networking and making sure that they're not working in silos, whether it be inadvertently or, just intentional. At the end of the day, it really slowed things down. So yeah, I think just kind of recognizing that and then making sure we're being intentional about building those partnerships was really effective for us.
I have a quick question about back to the beginning of this fundraiser. It was a lot about protecting the elders in the community. And we've understood that elders are seen as the keepers of your knowledge, your traditions, and your language. So could you talk a little bit about how you bring their voices to the work being done through the nonprofit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we consult with elders in a sort of an unofficial way. We have talked about establishing a community advisory board, not necessarily of elders, but certainly elders would be part of that. And then on our board right now, we do have sort of an age spectrum. And Shondine was our youth representative before she became the director for the Monument Valley Community Center. But so that's how we kind of incorporate elder and our staff as well. We have some elders on our staff that we seek guidance from and input from, and it's been really invaluable to get sort of that intel, in terms of like what our elders need, and how we can better meet those needs. And then recently we've started collaborating with senior centers as well, because wanting to, we had our first wave of COVID relief last year. I would say from the beginning of the onset of the pandemic through for a year, a little bit, it spilled over a little bit more. We kind of wound down our relief effort in late June, early July, hoping that we were through the worst of COVID, but also knowing and tracking what was happening with Delta and concerned about that and other variants. But, we invested a lot of money. I would say probably about $12 million. We're still kind of firming up the accounting on that in doing that first wave of relief. And we didn't want to spend all of our funding on just that reactive sort of thing. We wanted to make sure that we were promoting sustainable change. And that is one thing that our donors were asking. A lot of our funding came from crowdfunding, and people were, posting like, well, what's being done for the long term to meet these needs? And so it was very important for us to start the proactive resiliency-based work that Shondine is doing right now. And so we kind of shifted gears and opened our Sabine Sky Community Center in Monument Valley on August 1. And that has been really, really successful. We've had over 400 visitors so far, and Shondine can tell you more. And there's some really beautiful stories about that. But, in August, July and August, we saw a rapid doubling of our weekly COVID numbers, which we had been tracking because it was like, we need to know what's happening before it actually happens in our community, so we can mobilize and respond as quickly as possible. And so when we saw that happen, especially mid-August, I was like, okay, we are in a Delta wave right now. And we weren't really hearing that conversation from our tribal government, because it was all about like, oh, we're the most highly vaccinated community, and like, think we should be able to handle this fine, but we weren't seeing that in the actual data. And so we're like, well, we don't want to, shift our transition. We still want to help. We still want to help, absolutely. But we don't have as many resources to do that with now. So we wanted to have a very focused approach. And so that was the genesis of our Delta Relief Program, where we're providing on-call assistance if people are sick or isolating. If they're sick or exposed, they can call for assistance, and we'll provide them with 2 weeks worth of food, water, PPE, as well as things to help alleviate symptoms, or basically, dog food, whatever the family needs to stay home, so that we can help them get through that difficult time. They don't have the stress of having to go find these things. They may not, if it's the middle of the month, they may not have the funding to acquire those things. And then on the flip side, it's sort of like we're protecting our community from potential exposure as well, right? By keeping those folks home. And so we've had this much more focused approach this second round in that type of relief. And then also just getting PPE to our elders through the senior centers, getting them oximeters and contactless thermometers so they can be monitoring their health in a proactive way, so that if something goes wrong, they know to go into the hospital and get it checked out. Which of course right now has been really important with the waning efficacy of the vaccine. But that's what we're doing to help meet the needs of our elders now. And that's really important because we've heard of one hospital facility on the Navajo Nation that doesn't have oximeters to provide to folks who are COVID positive even. And other facilities are, recycling, they're like asking for people to give them back and reusing them. So there is a need for these sorts of things in our community. And then of course, we continue to get input from our elders. And Shanita, have you experienced any communication from the elders at the local level? I know Shani is sort of like our pulse on the community because she's right there in the community.
Yeah, I think here at least we have a really strong relationship with our senior center in Aljeto. So just having that open line of communication with their director, anytime we're able to get our hands on resources, we make sure it gets to our elders first. And then just hearing, feedback like through the community center with different projects we're doing there. We're offering different classes. Right now we have computer skills classes, beading workshops, and sewing classes. So a lot of those came about from feedback directly from the community members, and more so for elders. We have a lot of elders in our computer skills classes because that is something they never learned, and we're a little bit embarrassed to admit, right? Like the world's moving so fast and there's still so many of our people who are not keeping up. And so, the way we kind of create those classes is based on feedback through surveys or general conversations with folks who come into the community center. And the computer skills class is my favorite because these are elders, these are grandmas and grandpas coming in like, I just got this phone. How do you use it? Or, my grandkid wants to communicate on email. Like, what is that? How do I make one? Just very being open and honest. And I think it's really beautiful to see that, right? Them knowing they can trust us and we will teach them. And so, we get a lot of input from elders that way. And then, from our more arts and craft classes, elders who have that knowledge and want to pass it down. So teaching our beading classes or our sewing workshops, attending those and sharing what they know. So really, it's just really great to be able to create this space of comfort and knowledge sharing where, there's this intergenerational sharing and passing down from our elders and getting their input. I think too, it's important because we do have a lot of intergenerational households, but also, grandpas and grandmas raising, grandchildren who are very young. And so, needing resources, needing information, and then being able to come access that at our community center too is very helpful on their end. And so, again, I think just that constant flow of communication and understanding the day-to-day needs of our people and especially of our elders helps us do a better job and make sure that we're actually meeting the needs of our people? And so just having that constant, check-in and that constant communications in terms of what we're doing. Are we actually serving the people we need to be serving? Are we making the impact that, we are intending to? And so I think we're very proactive and intentional, especially through the community center, about what we're doing and how we're going about it to make sure that, everyone in our community, elders, young people, parents, everyone's involved in making sure that they're getting what they need.
One thing I would love to see once things are in a better place with the pandemic and we can have more group-based activities. I mean, because we're really careful, like the beading class, we limit how many people can attend that so that there's social distancing and we're not putting anyone at risk. But at some point, and maybe this is the way to facilitate that voice, is we would love to have our elders transmitting their knowledge to the next generation at the local level. Having maybe an elder board for the particular community center might be a way of facilitating that. But that's another part of being pandemic proof, right? One of the big threats of losing so many people, and especially disproportionately losing our elders, was the loss of language and culture. And it was like, we can't do this. There was no notice. How do we make sure that we're not losing massive amounts of knowledge? And so one way to do that is to create that vehicle for transmission through our community centers, through culture and language programming. And actually, we have a bigger vision to establish a language and culture institute, which we are hoping to get ARPA funding for. But there are groups that have language and culture institutes. I always reference the Mormon Church. They send their missionaries to this language program and they study Navajo language for a number of months, and then they're in our community and they're speaking more fluently than our own tribal members. So how do we duplicate that model? Like every Navajo Nation employee should go through this sort of a language training program, and our own people should have the ability to access that. And so how do we provide that access so that our young people, our everyone in our community could spend 3 months spend 3 months in an intensive language and culture programming to fill the gaps where they may not have received that knowledge from their families. And also, there are other conversations to be had about developing after school programs and youth culture and language institutes, so that every summer our kids are going to culture camp and they're improving in the fluency of their language. Maybe there's an after school program that is further advancing that. So we have big dreams in this area, and this will be led in substantial part by our elders.
Yeah, I love that idea and that goal for the future. It's so awesome to think about. And I think you all pretty much answered another one of our questions, which was about sort of how does the traditional, cultural knowledge and all this wisdom, how does that serve as an asset for managing the environment and for, increasing resilience to future pandemics and climate change. So you definitely touched on that. One thing I was curious about is how do you identify sort of in setting up these workshops and these filling the needs of the community members that come to you and say, like, I want to learn how to use my phone or the computer, or I want to learn this skill. How do you facilitate finding somebody to teach that? Is that somebody else in the community that you happen to know who has that skill, and what's that process like?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both, actually. So, we have surveys that everyone who comes to the community center fills out, and it's just for us to get a better understanding of who we're serving, right? And a lot of those questions are about what they need and what they want from this community center, because we've never had a community center, so it's really new to everyone, and just for them to realize, like, wow, I have free access to these resources, and making sure that they have a say in what we're providing as well, I think is really important. So, we, in our first month, kind of we're conducting those surveys and getting feedback, and we're able to start our first class in October. But majority of people who filled out our surveys and indicated that they wanted to learn how to use the computer, or wanted to learn a skill. I think something we saw throughout the pandemic was a lot of small businesses were able to move online pretty seamlessly, right? And so they were able to maintain an income and support their family. Well, on the reservation, Ethel mentioned earlier, the really low rate of access to broadband. So, small businesses had to just completely shut down, and their income stopped, and they weren't able to provide that support. So, learning skills like how to create, a website, or how to move your marketplace online. In Monument Valley, we have a lot of tourism here. So we have, our small business owners who come to use the center, to create a TripAdvisor, or to create a way for people to find out about their business. And then, our workshops, like our beading and sewing, these are people who want to learn the skill so that they can, sell these things online to support their families, start a small business. And so kind of just going off that initial feedback from our surveys and getting to know the community members who are coming to the center is why we chose to do those classes. Right now, in terms of like who are teaching these classes, for our computer classes, actually one of our staffers and my brother said he's really skilled in IT more than I am, and just really, is up to date with computers and tech and everything. So he teaches those classes, and I help where I can. But in terms of our beading and sewing, these are just community members I knew of who like are really good in this area, and we're also just wanting to give back to the community in this manner. Growing up, just from my mom and like hanging out with her friends and my aunties, hearing them constantly say, if we had a community center, we could do sewing classes, or, all of these ideas for projects. And now that we actually do have that space, it was just a matter of following up and, them, of course, being really interested to kind of share what they know, and also learn new skills. So again, it's just reaching out to community members themselves, which going back to what we talked about earlier, the talent exists here. It's just providing the resources, providing that space to foster the growth in our, our young people, and our knowledge sharing capabilities from our elders. So, that's kind of our process so far. As we get further along in establishing our community center and focusing more on aspects of, our food sovereignty, and bringing in people to lead workshops on our hoop houses that we're hoping to get up here soon. I think that will be pretty vital in terms of the community members having access to learning these skills, and taking it back home. But again, providing this space for people in our community who have so much knowledge that they want to share, and just didn't have that place to do so. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of, cross-pollination of ideas, and just making sure we're, reaching out when we can, and being really intentional about providing the opportunity for our local people as well.
I actually wanted to add on to the topic of, how our cultural and language workshops tie into managing the environment and increasing resilience. Because, though we want to promote a spiritual reconnection between our youth and the land. And so providing a space for that language, or that knowledge transmission is really important. I have bear's ears behind me right here. And that's something that is, very close to where Shondine is. So we have a vision of, taking our young people to these sacred spaces and teaching them about them, and reconnecting, like, because for Navajo Nation, and this is another thing that I would love people to know about Navajo Nation, is that you know, there is only one place to be Navajo, and that's on our nation. You know, you see these landmarks, but they're not just formations. They're sites where important aspects of our creation story happened, right? And there is spiritual power to these spaces, different types of spiritual power. So teaching our young people about that, reconnecting to them to that, connecting the dots between ceremony and space and land is really, really important, and helping them understand their ceremonial and prayer obligations to maintaining balance and maintaining harmony with the land, so that it will bring rain, it will bring life. And there's been such a huge disruption in that relationship between our people and the land. So we're hoping to transform that, and that will help our young people have a very different mindset in terms of maintenance of of spaces and protection and preservation of spaces. You know, that's something that was missing when all of these extractive leases were entered into, and there was no thought to how do we maintain or restore the balance. Is there a way to pursue this that is culturally resonant? You know, and I could go into, like, you know, with uranium, that's a perfect example. In our traditions, in our beliefs, we were never supposed to disturb those. Those are the, you know, bones of monsters. And if we disturb them, it would reawaken those monsters. And now we see, you know, cancer in our community, people who've died from radiation exposure, our workers who were in those mines. So, you know, hopefully that means that in the future, if we're able to do this, and I have lots of faith in our ability to do these things, then that could really transform the outlook for our nation and the health and welfare of our community, and of our land.
Thank you. That was really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And we just have, looks like a couple minutes left. So final question, just kind of looking forward, like what resources does your organization need right now? And how do you see it growing in the future? Kind of like, what is that long-term plan, more community centers, the like language institute you're talking about? Like, what do you see as the barriers and resources you need to get to that vision?
John, do you want to answer that first, or?
You can take it. I'll follow up on you.
I feel like I talk too much, but okay, sure. So, well, you know, we're doing two things at once, and we had hoped that we wouldn't have to continue doing that. But we're starting to understand that this may be a long-term situation where we're constantly doing emergency response, even while we're working towards resiliency. And so, you know, like right now, COVID is not good in our community. And so we're hoping to, we're going to do a very strong push to fundraise for COVID relief. We would really like to be able to provide food, water, and PPE in our communities in December, January, and February, at the same level that we were doing last year. And so that's about a cost of, like, I would say $200,000 to $250,000 a week. So very expensive prospect there. And we'll be looking to individual donors as well as foundation-based support. You know, everyone has COVID fatigue right now, though. So that is really important to us. But then, you know, the community centers are also extremely important for that long-term transformational change. So we did form a GoFundMe for our resiliency fund in September. And so it kind of gives folks an option, like, do you want to help with something immediate? Do you want to help with something long-term? Do you want to help with both? So, but we do need help in both of those areas. we're blessed to be able to have seed money for the Sabine Sky Community Center in Monument Valley. But we are looking for funding for additional community centers. We have a possible prospect for New Mexico. So we're very hopeful that we'll have a few more off the ground there soon. And so that would mean we would have presence in 3 states. And then that would leave a need for Arizona. And we do have a partner who is willing to hit the ground running with that. And so we are looking for funding for that. So, you know, and this is just the beginning, right? You know, this is the first wave of activity. I mentioned the Language and Culture Institute. I am hoping that we'll get some governmental funding for that. But in the absence of that, you know, we've looked to the good people of this country and the world. We've been very fortunate to have broad support from across the globe for the work that we're doing. And so that's certainly a way that folks can help. That's kind of laying out a little bit of, you know, what our activities and our needs are going to be for the next probably 2 or 3 years. And then hopefully, you know, we are looking to also work on land reform. That's sort of something we want to get off the ground next year because there is not adequate housing on Navajo Nation. We have experienced a huge depopulation and massive brain drain over the last 40 years. In 1980, only 20% of our people lived off reservation. In 2010, 53% of our people lived off reservation. And that's because there are no jobs on the Navajo Nation. Typically, I mean, the most of the jobs are governmental jobs, and those are limited. There's not much turnover in those positions for the people who are in those positions. So that is a huge component to transforming our community. And so I'm really excited to get that work underway once we have kind of the momentum going with these other aspects of our work. And we have strong leadership throughout our team. You know, Shandine is a perfect example of that. And then, you know, on our relief side, we also have very strong leadership there. So I think it's just a matter of time before we'll be able to pursue the land reform component. Shandine, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add, you know, in terms of like support coming in where we need more help too. I think, you know, it's really great to kind of just spread awareness, right? When it comes to like sharing our GoFundMe, I see a lot of activity on Instagram, which is amazing. And that's how, you know, you all found us as well. But I think too, and another way to give back, you know, you may not necessarily have the funding to contribute to us in that way, but I think too, understanding like there's so many more ways you can become involved, right? Like we have a really amazing group of volunteers who've really been with us since the beginning. I mean, we all started as volunteers. And so I believe we were able to mobilize over 1,200 volunteers throughout last year's relief effort. And so I think, you know, finding ways to become involved, like we, you know, we are always looking for volunteers and to just kind of spread our reach even farther than we have right now. So, you know, whatever skill set you have, you know, definitely can be, we can put you to work for sure. So I think just finding those ways, you know, you can give back. I think we've seen a lot of that and have received a lot of help and insight from our volunteer base. And so that's just something I wanted to add on to, you know, it's not always just the aspect of donations, but like donating your time, donating, you know, your ability, your platform on social media to share what we're putting out to, I think is really critical to our success.
Thank you. And I think those were all most of our questions. Abby, if you want to wrap up.
Yeah, no, I just thank you all so much for agreeing to speak with us. And this was an amazing conversation. And yeah, thank you all for your time. This was such a gift.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having us and for your support for Shandine and the work that she's doing. Really, really appreciate that.
We definitely look forward to keeping tabs and hearing how things continue to develop for you guys. This is awesome.
Thank you so much, Atul and Shandine.
Thank you.
You guys have a beautiful day.
You too. Stay
Take care.
warm.
All right. Hakuanet.
Yeah.
Bye.
Sounds good.